I will first run through the chapter and then, as always, share some of the very interesting stories, in some way also eccentric stories, but very interesting. So the Lord Buddha says that better than 1,000 speeches without any meaningful word is a single word, hearing which one attains peace. Better than 1,000 songs without any meaningful word is a single word of a song, hearing which one attains peace. Better than 100 teachings on Dharma without any meaningful word is one word about Dharma, hearing which one attains peace. If one were to conquer thousands in battle, and if someone were to conquer just one thing, himself or herself, he or she indeed would be the victor in the supreme battle. It is much better to conquer oneself than to conquer other people. To tame oneself than to tame others. And to ever act with self-control. Because no God, no Gandharva, no Mara, Mara is a form of demon, no Brahma can turn such a person's victory into defeat. If someone were to sacrifice every month 1,000 times for 100 years, whereas someone else were to venerate just for an instant somebody who has fully cultivated themselves, then such a worship is better than 100 years of puja. Whatever person might worship Agni in the forest for 100 years, whereas someone else were to venerate merely for an instant somebody who has fully cultivated themselves, then such a puja is better than 100 years of offerings to Agni. Whatever sacrifice or offering there is in the world, that someone would sacrifice for a whole year seeking punya, merit, all that is not worth 1/4 of showing respect to someone who has the right conduct. For one who shows respect to those of virtuous character, paying homage to the venerable ones, 4 things increase: the lifespan, their radiance, their happiness, and their strength. It is better to live one day with virtuous conduct and meditation than to live for 100 years with a bad character and lack of concentration. It is better to live one day with wisdom and meditation than to live for 100 years without wisdom and concentration. It is better to live one day making a real effort at realizing truth than to live for 100 years with laziness. It is better to live one day observing the rising and falling than to live for 100 years not observing rising and falling. I'll explain this in a moment. It is better to live one day glimpsing the deathless state than to live for 100 years never beholding the deathless state. And finally, it is better to live one day beholding the supreme Dharma than to live for 100 years never encountering the Dharma. Some very radical statements there. In a way, the Buddha is saying that just a day of truly connecting with the Dharma and with the absolute truth, reality in our heart is better than spending a lifetime in a career, a highly complex world with lots of ups and downs, with all our family problems and issues. It's a very radical statement that a single day is better than a whole lifetime. So now here there are some very eccentric stories that there was an executioner, someone who executes thieves. And his name was in Pali, Dhammadhattika, which is maybe in Sanskrit, Dhamra something, I'm not sure, but Dhammadhattika in Pali. And he was an executioner for 55 years. And when he was very old, he just retired from that post and was preparing khichdi at his house. And after having his khichdi, he went to the river and he had still had some khichdi with him when he happened to meet Sariputra, one of the chief disciples of Buddha. And Shariputra was a perfect practitioner. He had just arisen from samadhi, from the absolute samadhi, and went for bhiksha from door to door. And this is when Dhammadhattika met him and felt sudden radiance coming from this great Shariputra. And he thought to himself that throughout my life I've been executing thieves. Now I had better do something auspicious and offer my khichdi to this monk. So he offered him the khichdi and Shariputra had the meal and taught him some Dharma. But because the agitation from all his negative deeds, having been an executioner, was present in him, Dhammadhattika constantly had to think of all the things he had done and couldn't really pay attention. And Shariputra recognized this because he was able to read the mind, the emotion of Dharmapada. And recognizing this, he tactfully asked him, did you execute those thieves because you wanted to just kill them, or did you do so by order of the king because you were part of this system? And Dharmapada answered that it was indeed because of the king's orders and never because he wished to kill. So then the monk asked him, so then does that make you guilty or not? And Dharmapada deeply contemplated this for a moment and felt a certain lightness overcome him, a certain relief, seeing that he was not solely responsible for those deeds, but he had been part of a system and he had followed the orders of the king. Thus, he was not fully guilty, and this gave him a sense of relief and calm. And he once again requested Shariputra to teach him the Dharma. So Shariputra taught him about how to concentrate, and practicing that, Dharmapada relatively quickly attained a certain insight, which is called Anuloma Jnana. Very technical point, I won't explain that, but he reached that insight. This is one of 16 insights, which perhaps one day in a future session we can cover. 16 insights through which one passes as one practices the Buddha's way of meditating. So he reached one of these insights and wanted to go and report it to Shariputra, but on his way to reporting, it's quite sad what happened. He was crushed to death by a bull. And when the monks and nuns heard about this in the evening and reported it to Shariputra and the Buddha explained that while Dharmapada was not fully guilty, since he was part of that system of following the king's orders and so on, and he was not acting from emotion, it was not his personal will or wish to kill, it was not revenge or some deep emotion that was causing him to do those actions. Nevertheless, it is still an accumulation of karmic debt, great karmic debts. But because he also had some punya, some merit, he was able to meet Shariputra and comprehend something of the Dharma before he died. But then suddenly, all this weight of negative karma came together and crushed him in the form of that bull. So while he had been able to attain a certain level of insight, he couldn't complete the path because the karmic effects came together. And he had to reap those, had to go through those. And yet the bhikkhus were amazed at how such an evildoer, someone who had executed people, could still reach a level of insight after just listening to the Dharma for a short while. And that is where the Buddha said that it is not the length of the speeches, it's not hearing 1,000 speeches that matters, but actually a single meaningful teaching, whereby one attains peace. And the story is quite extreme, but if we apply it to ourselves, many of us have committed negative actions in our life. And if not negative actions, negative states. This is something that people often forget. It is not only our actions, the concrete outer things we have done, is also our inner states. Wishing others something bad, or at least not wishing them something good, being stuck in cycles of envy and jealousy, very subtle emotions, subtle negative emotions. These are also actions. You see, there is physical action, there is mental action as well, and there is the action of speech. But all these arise very often because we are part of a system, we're part of some dynamic, some group dynamic. So it is not that we are ever fully guilty just by ourselves. Thus, on the path of Dharma, we must never let guilt pull us down in such a way that we don't practice. You see, that is the core message there. That even if you have been an executioner, and I sincerely hope that none of you are in that profession, if you are, welcome to our Dharmapada session. I don't think you are, but even if you're in a field that perhaps is not fully wholesome, is not fully auspicious, nonetheless, don't let guilt pull you down. Guilt is not a positive emotion. It's not a constructive emotion that allows us to move forward and to grow. We also find this in the Gita. Api chet suduracharo bhajate mamananyabhag sadhureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hisaha. That even when someone is of extremely bad character or behavior or conduct, once they change and begin to approach Krishna, they should be considered sadhu, they should be considered good or noble because they have taken the right decision. So you see, this is a similar teaching here. Don't hold on to guilt even though negative things happened in the past. Rather, move on, let it go, move on, practice Dharma. It's very important teaching. But then also the teaching here is that we must acknowledge that negative karmas are there and they will come to fruition. That is really the truth. And it is better that we accept the truth of that rather than fight it. It is better than, for instance, to say, oh, I will do lots of japa, I will do lots of pujas, lots of prayers, and then all my bad karmas will vanish, and then I'll have a really good life. Nothing bad will happen to me. And I will just slip through life with great luck and fortune. And you see, that is really the view that many people take. But first of all, it is not possible, because the weight of negative karmas from previous lifetimes is quite strong. So it is going to take place in our life. If not now, when we get older, we will feel the pains. We will feel I feel them now already. I always tell all of you, sometimes I feel that I'm 90. You see, when I wake up in the morning, for at least 15, 30 seconds, I feel that I'm 90 or 95. It feels like that. Then fortunately, things get better. But we have to accept that we are in this human embodiment, which is ripe with disease and illness. And these things are going to happen, you see, if not now, later. And perhaps you're one of those who are really lucky and it doesn't happen. And that means wonderful, excellent. But isn't it better to accept that our human karma and the human embodiment is not such a great one? You see, we're not gods. We are sort of in the middle. We are also not demons, fortunately, but we are sort of in the middle between everyone. But isn't it better to wholly and fully accept that this human embodiment is going to take its course? Therefore, let's focus on the supreme Dharma. Let's focus on realization rather than trying to fight it, rather than trying to dissolve the negative karmas, to have a better life here in this lifetime. I think this is very important teaching, to just accept that cause and effect will take their course. And therefore, let us not try to fight them, but let us relax. Let us accept. That is equanimity after all. Let us accept the course of things. And of course, do whatever we can, if we have the opportunity, to improve life for ourselves and for others, but not in such a tense way, because that's not going to improve or change much. And then there's another teaching, which is also very eccentric, about Kundalakesi in Pali, probably Kundalakeshi in Sanskrit, who was the daughter of a merchant from Rajagriha. And she was always secluded in her father's house, sort of protected. She really grew up as a sort of a spoilt girl, protected by her family. And one day she happened to see a thief being led out for execution. And strangely, she fell in love with him. It's almost like in a Bollywood film, right? Where it's always ulta. It's sort of that which shouldn't happen happens. She fell in love with him and she begged her daddy, "Daddy, daddy, daddy, please pay for the freedom of the thief." And in those days, things were quite rough, but if you paid enough money for your offense, then you could become free. So her daddy, sort of full of emotion for his spoiled princess, we might say, paid off the debt of the thief. And thus the thief was freed, and then they married. And although she loved him so dearly, her husband, after all, was a thief. And he was in truth only attracted to her property and her jewels. So one day, he coaxed her to put on all her best jewelry, the most precious jewelry, and that he wanted to go on a trip to a local mountain to make offerings to the devata of the mountain, because he believed that it was because of that devata that he had been saved, and that she should put on her best jewelry on this occasion. So Kundalakeshi did so and went along with her husband. But when they reached their destination, the thief revealed to her that he intended to kill her and to take all her jewels and gold. And she pleaded with him, just take the jewels, just take the gold, and to spare her life. But it was of no avail, because the thief thought that she would then report him to the local police, and then he would be captured again. So she realized that she had no way of escaping this situation, and so she thought that she must now be cautious and crafty. So she told her husband that since they were going to be together only for a few more moments, and since he is like a god for her, she wanted to pay respects to him one last time. She wanted to touch his feet and do pradakshina of him. This was very common in ancient India, that one did pradakshina not only of temples or of gurus, but actually also of people one respected. Pradakshina means to walk around the person on the right-hand side. Keeping the person on one's right side is called pradakshina. This was very common in ancient India. I'm surprised that over the centuries or millennia, this is no longer the custom today in India to walk around a person. So her husband agreed. So she bowed down, touched his feet, and went around him respectfully. And when she was behind him, she pushed him off the cliff. It really says it in the story. She pushed him off the cliff. So that was quite a clever lady, right? He wants to take her life, and she pushes him off the cliff. So after this event, she had no desire to return home. She was totally devastated, and she took off all her jewelry, all the gold, put it on a tree, and went on her way without any idea where she was going, totally disoriented. And she happened to come to a place where there were some parivrajikas. This is the ancient Buddhist term for female wandering ascetics, parivrajikas. And she felt so inspired seeing these innocent, saintly ladies that she wanted to become a parivrajika herself. And they taught her so many things, how to debate, how to speak. And because she was, after all, quite well educated and very smart, she mastered all of them. And then her teachers told her that she should go out and on her trips around India, she should debate with people. And she should only become the student of someone if that person can answer all her questions. So Kundalakeshi went throughout the length and breadth of Jambudvipa, that is ancient India, and openly challenged everyone to a debate with her. And on one occasion, she came to Shravasti, and there she saw Shariputra, the Buddha's main disciple, and she also took him up for a challenge and said, I want to ask you questions, and if you can answer all of them, I will become your student. And he answered all of them and told her, but now I wish to ask you a question. And he asked in Pali, and that is also the same in Sanskrit, the following question: Ekam nama kim? What is the one? What is that which is called the one? And Kundalakeshi could not answer this question. So she asked Shariputra to teach her the answer. And his response was that she could only know the answer by becoming a bhikshuni, by becoming a meditator, a spiritual practitioner. And after a short while, because she was so diligent, it is said that she became an arhat. Arhat is the highest stage of realization that comes through meditation. And the Buddha's bhikshus, knowing her story, were quite amazed and asked, is it possible for the bhikshuni Kundalakeshi to have become an arhat just by listening to the Dharma taught by Shariputra, even though she had such a dramatic story before, and the Buddha said, yes, indeed, it is possible when we set our mind to the goal, when we really, really dedicate ourselves to realizing truth. So this story is similar to the previous one. Don't worry so much about what you've done or what you haven't done in this life. Rather, use the time now, the precious moment that you have, where you sense that, yes, there is a deeper truth to this existence. Let me work to realize it. And then seek out the path. Find a teacher who can answer all your questions and who can guide you. That is what Gundalakeshi did. And then there is another interesting story where a Brahmin known as Āchārya in Pali, although this seems to be Anartha Pritchaka, someone who asks meaningless things. So this couldn't really have been his name, but perhaps that is what the title they gave him afterwards. This Brahmin came to the Buddha and asked him about practices that help us to become rich and wealthy. And I also get these questions, you see. So I'm not the Buddha, of course, but I really do get these questions. People ask me, how can I get rich from all the, the scriptural studies that you have made and all the mantras that you know? Can you teach me those that can make me rich? I get these questions. So if we get these questions in the 21st century, I am quite sure that the Buddha must have gotten them in the 6th century BCE, so 2,600 years ago. I also get questions like, how can I attract women? I want to have a girlfriend, or I want to get married. Can you teach me a mantra to attract a wife? And similar questions. So I'm not saying that these things don't exist, you see, but this is Anartha Pritchaka. This is exactly why they call this Brahmin Anartha Pritchaka, one who asks meaningless things. They're not meaningless, of course, because yes, we need these things in life, but in view of liberation, in view of becoming truly free, they are meaningless, aren't they? So in any case, the Buddha was quite a liberal. He was quite free as well. And when he was asked this question, the Buddha said that, yes, I do know not only the practices that are beneficial, but also that those that are not beneficial. But the Buddha didn't teach him how to become rich. Rather, he told him 6 practices to make sure that one doesn't become poor. And the first one is, oh no, sorry, I misread. 6 practices that cause poverty, that cause us to lose wealth. The first one is sleeping after sunrise. And I'm sure that many of you might have heard this from your parents as well. This is a very ancient Indian teaching. Sleeping until after sunrise. The second is habitual idleness, to have idleness as a habit, to always have as your basic state idleness. I don't really want to do anything. I just want to lie around. The third is very interesting, cruelty towards animals or towards humans. So cruelty causes our wealth to be lost. The fourth is indulging in intoxicants, which can cause drunkenness or negligence. So that means, of course, things like alcohol or drugs and all these things. The fifth one is roaming the streets at improper hours. So that means to wander the streets at nighttime. I'm sure that some among you have been wandering the streets of London in the night. I'm just joking, but it is interesting that the Buddha says this causes the dissipation of wealth. And the last one is sexual misconduct. Of course, it's not defined what sexual misconduct is, but as a category, it is very interesting. And we could probably spend a whole session discussing why these 6 practices cause the dissipation of wealth. But it does make sense that when we are cruel to others, then we can't really expect to grow wealth auspiciously. And when we are roaming the streets at improper hours, we might gain a bad reputation. Maybe these 6 are also to be seen in the context of ancient India. Whereas today, surely, if we look at rich people, many of them are practicing precisely these things, and yet they are still rich. So you see, it doesn't perhaps apply to modern times anymore, but then they also don't have a very auspicious energy around them. It's a very interesting story. And then there's one last one, perhaps before we go to the meditation. There was a monk known as Kaundinya, and he received a meditation instruction from the Buddha and went into the jungle to practice it, and practiced it so well that he really attained the samadhi concentration. And he wanted to come back and pay homage to the Buddha, but on his way, he took a break because he was quite tired, and he sat down on a stone and fixed his mind upon the practice and achieved samadhi. And when we are in that state, it is like the body is paralyzed. It's such a deep absorption that it looks as if one is dead. And he was in that state for a long, long time. And at night, a group of robbers who had looted a village came to this place. And because, of course, they couldn't see well, and because he was so silent, so still in his absorption, completely like paralyzed, they took him to be a tree stump, like a kind of log. And they put all their bundles of whatever they had looted around him on the ground. And when the day broke and it became light, they realized that what they had taken to be a tree stump was in fact a living being. And they were so shocked that they thought it was some kind of spirit or ghost and wanted to run away in fright. But waking up from his meditation, Kaundinya revealed to them that he was just a monk, that he wasn't a ghost, and that they shouldn't be afraid of him. And the robbers were so touched by him that they asked him for forgiveness for their mistakes, and that they wanted to return what they had looted. So they were so inspired by him telling them, "Don't be afraid, I'm not a ghost, I'm just a monk." They were so touched by that kindness, sweetness that he exuded. And from that time onwards, he was known no longer just as Kaundinya, but as Sthanu Kaundinya, So that means the tree stump Kaundinya. So in the Buddha's order, he got this nickname that they called him Sthanu Kaundinya. And this is just me adding on to the story that in Vedanta, there is always these examples that you mistake a tree stump for a human. So who knows, perhaps this goes back to this story that ignorance is exactly like that, is that we see in the dark, we see a tree stump, or rather we see a human and we think it's a tree stump. But when we realize, then we understand it's a human being. So he inspired even these robbers to change their ways. And that is why the Buddha says that it is better to live one day with wisdom and meditation than to live for 100 years without wisdom and concentration. Today, exceptionally, I would like to share with you a practice that is from this particular tradition that the Buddha started. And this is a practice that none of you have heard before. It is a kasina practice, or kritsna practice in Sanskrit, kasina practice, which is related to concentration rather than to the breath or to observing states. And I'm not sharing this with you because I want you to, to have all these different methods and then to be totally confused. But I want to show you there are in fact practices that you haven't heard of. And that when you go deeper into meditation, it becomes interesting to experiment with other approaches and other methods. So this is a kasina or kritsna practice, and it works like this. Please, all of you, relax first. And now try to find a spot in your body that produces a pleasurable feeling. Initially, it is difficult to identify it, but what works well is, for instance, this area of the chest or the bottom of the spine where your behind is touching the seat. Try to identify a spot physically, where you sense some very subtle pleasure. And then totally immerse your concentration upon that spot. Breathing in and out through that spot. What that means is, if you identify the bottom of the spine, or some people also feel some subtle pleasure at the navel, if you find that spot, as you breathe, you're breathing in and out while totally concentrating on that spot only, not on your breath. So please do that now for a few minutes, and then I'll give you the next instruction. The purpose is to increase the pleasure, concentrating on the spot that is already giving you pleasure, and then increasing it by keeping your concentration there. Okay? concentrate, concentrate on your spot. Allow the pleasure to become stronger. If you've lost it, find another spot or find it again. And now allow it to expand, to become stronger and stronger. If you can feel that pleasurable sensation, concentrate only on that now without the spot. Only take the feeling of pleasure now. Only the feeling, the joyful feeling, and concentrate on that. And expand that joyful feeling. If you have lost it, go back to the pleasure point and repeat till you have regained the feeling. And then expand it again. Concentrate, concentrate, expand it. And now in a last step, concentrate on the innermost of this joyful feeling. Try to see, what is joy really? What is it really? Concentrate, concentrate. What is joy when we concentrate on it? This practice, which is only very shortly done now, is a way to achieve what in the Buddhist tradition is called jhana, the first jhana. This very systematic practice that one isolates a point of pleasure, and we all have that. As I said, the bottom of the spine, or the navel, or heart, or elsewhere. One isolates that and then concentrates till that pleasure becomes palpable and experienced more. And then one isolates that pleasurable feeling till it becomes joy. And then one concentrates on the joyful feeling. Now I want to ask, if I was successful in guiding you a little bit through this first jhana practice, what did you experience when I asked, so what is joy if you concentrate on it? If you manage to get a glimpse of that. If you like, you can write into the chat privately. Someone says, I felt cold and comfortable, concentrating on the joy. Someone says it is happiness. Yes, it is happiness, but even deeper. Someone says space. Very good, my dear. So now you see, without you knowing anything about this Buddhist jhana, I can tell you that the first jhana spills over into the second jhana, which is space. Exactly. So you see, wonderful. Then someone says, connected with stage one, very well, then tingly, the joy felt just like a feeling. Yes, exactly. So one has to concentrate. Now, of course, we only did this for a few minutes. But this very specific way of practicing it's different from what we usually teach, right? This is not Maitri and Vimarsha and awareness. This is something else, actually. This is related to the Kasina meditation tradition. It's very interesting. And then another person says, I felt a lot of tension in my diaphragm relax. I felt it relieve a lot of stress. Yes, definitely. It relieves, absolutely. And the instruction is so simple. You isolate a spot in your body that is already pleasurable. It's something most people haven't even thought about. And then you concentrate on that till the pleasure becomes stronger. Then you isolate that till it becomes joy. Then you concentrate on that. It's a very simple instruction. So, something very powerful. And this leads to what is called the first jhana. So from priti, pleasure, comes sukham. From sukham comes the next. Then someone says, I would like to feel my joyful energy from my navel chakra, so trying to get, even though I was not at that time. Okay. Yes, a lot of people can feel this pleasurable spot in the navel. For me, it works best here and also at the bottom of the spine. But this is just my personal, everyone has their own. And it's very, very interesting if you do this. You can also see it can actually lift you out of a bad mood. So if you have a bad mood and you remember this first jhana practice, I will just type for you how jhana is written. First jhana practice is written like this, jhana. And there are 4 jhanas. The fourth is impossible almost to achieve, but the first and second ones, they are possible. So this is the first jhana practice. then if you do this, it really lifts you out of the bad mood. It's something very fascinating. More than other practices, it just, I can instantly produce pleasure and joy. So I just wanted to give you this little glimpse that there are some very, very interesting practices. And someone says, bottom of the spine feels very pleasurable, intense, radiating, tingly feeling. Exactly, yes. So when we concentrate on that, you see, and not just for a few seconds, but we concentrate on that till it becomes more and more and more and more and more. That is the practice here, the first jhana practice. So maybe one day we can do a retreat just on the first jhana practice. It would be very interesting, seeing how all of you have responded very well to this. It's very fascinating. And then second jhana, third jhana, who knows, maybe we will get there one day, but it's very, very interesting. So I'm happy to see how well you have responded to it. Because my fear was that I would get a blank stare from you, that what is he talking about? Excellent. So we pay homage to the Buddha, to the incredible teachings that have come from him. And I wish all of you lots of joy. Take that radiating, tingling feeling. Someone says sun changing to brightness. Wonderful. Take this radiating, tingly feeling, this joyful feeling, and the white light that is also related to this tradition. Wonderful. Take this into your daily life, share it with others. Don't only keep it for yourself. Be very happy and see you soon for the next chapter. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Have a wonderful weekend.